All right, here we go, guys. It's part three of the Washington versus Alabama preview series that I'm doing. Today, I'm going to talk about the coaching staffs. I already did the defensive stats and the offensive stats. Today, I'm going to do the coaching staff, and then following, I'll try to do a little bit of the games I've seen from Washington and describe some of the matchups and get into analyzing how these teams fare off. But I had to get into the coaching staff because I realized I didn't know a lot about the Washington coaching staff. I mean, I know Chris Petersen. I know the work he did at Boise State. A lot of respect for him in the coaching circles, and so I thought I'll give the Alabama fans a little run through of things about him, and maybe the Washington fans a little bit about the Alabama staff as well. So here we go. I'm going to start with the UW coaching staff. Not all of it, just some of the people in it, some of the things I found interesting, and I'll do the same with Alabama. Not a comprehensive list of their coaching staff, but just a little bit of what I noticed. So I'm going to start with Chris Petersen, the man who assembled this staff at UW. A lot of you know him from his days at Boise State, of course, where he led them to great heights, really, knocking off teams such as Oklahoma in the 2007 Fiesta Bowl, coaching guys such as Kellen Moore, Doug Martin, and really bringing, getting the most out of talent. I think he was there even with Orlando Scandrick, even. He was coaching Boise State at that time. But, yeah, getting talent out of a lot of guys, recruiting some of these 2-3-star guys, and bringing it out of them, fulfilling their potential, helping them blossom. And so I got a lot of respect for Coach Zoo and develop the talent as well as get it. Same way in a lot of ways like Nick Saban. Like, he figured out how to get a lot of talented players, but it takes more than getting talented players. You have to know how to develop these guys and make sure that they're playing in the scheme correctly and doing what they need to do to be successful. And Chris Petersen does that a lot in his coaching staff as well. Now, one thing I do notice with Chris Petersen, he's an interesting guy. He doesn't really get a lot of headlines for like a lot of his statements and stuff like that. He seems like a guarded guy, smart guy, keeps his head on his shoulders, surrounds himself with good staff, and seems to be a good evaluator of talent. They don't always hang out, number one, number two, top five recruiting classes, but apparently they're doing something right. They're getting some talented guys, got some of the best cornerbacks, keeping the state of Washington locked up in the recruiting game. So that's good. He's also known for his schemes. Most notably, the trick plays. A lot of people talk about that they used. They even used some against Colorado. They pulled out, I think, a weird play against USC. There's a few interesting things throughout the season. It's not always like the big ones like the hook and ladder on Statue of Liberty. Sometimes they'll just swing it back to the halfback. They have a swing it back to the wide receiver who can throw the ball down the field. So you got those type of things, and loves using different formations. He picks offensive coordinators who like to be balanced in their offense, but tend to, kind of go out and make different things happen. Try to establish the ground game. Try to hit a passing game that complements it, and uses different formations to get their receivers open, and has receivers who run routes really well because that helps you to move the ball and be balanced on offense. So Chris Petersen has a system that he likes, and he brings guys in who can run it. And he always seems to have a healthy respect for both the offense and defense. He likes to be a balanced team overall. His teams at Boise State, their defenses tend to be okay too. Even if they weren't the greatest, they did enough to handle the job and kept the team be successful. And just so happens with Washington, they're doing really, really good on defense right now. So I say all that to say that he went out there and got this guy, Pete Kwiatkowski. And his name is spelled really interesting, but I've heard that it's pronounced Kwiatkowski from him, I think, in one of the interviews. And Kwiatkowski has quite a pedigree, and I can see why Chris Petersen put him on his staff. He coordinated Montana State's defense. Now, Montana State's FCS Division II team. And Pete Kwiatkowski coordinated their defense for 6 years from the year 2000-2005 season, around that time. And basically, he had them leading just about a lot of categories every year that he was there. They had one of the best defenses in that whole run. I think they even got to the playoffs a few times with him, and that actually is a trend with him. He has a lot of defensive success wherever he goes, even as a player. He coached. He was the defense coordinator at Boise too, so that explains why he's at Washington. Chris Peterson had him when they were at Boise State, and when he came to Boise State, he made them better immediately. And then, of course, that same success followed with him at Washington as well. The way his team works is a little weird because it's kind of hard to fully describe, but I'll try to describe it, and you'll see it some when I talk about it in my video on how the matchups and how the players are. And it's important to note right here, though, that Pete Kwiatkowski is the co-defensive coordinator, and I'll talk about the other co-defensive coordinator in just a second because he's very integral to this team's success. But the way Kwiatkowski sets up his defense is he likes versatile players. And he likes to have matchup-proof players. You know, guys who are tweeners, guys who can play multiple positions in a way. Kind of hybrid-type players at spots like defensive end, linebacker, and at safety, at linebacker. Sort of kind of defensive ends can be outside linebackers, etc. The defense they kind of ran at Boise State, and it's fun because TCU kind of did this too. And it's a type of 4-2-5 defense. And I say it's a type of 4-2-5 because it's really interesting. Usually 4-2-5 is basically like 4 linemen-ish, 2 linebackers-ish, and 5 defensive backs. And it's multiple. They kind of switch it around. They used it at Boise, and they used their tweeners. So at Washington here, what they do is on that 4 up front, they have 2 heavy nose tackles. And I'm not going to talk about the players right now. I'll get into that when I talk about the games. But they use their 2 heavy nose tackles, guys like Daniels and whatnot. And then they'll stand up 2 rushers. And now you're thinking that these guys might be tweeners, might be kind of smaller linebackers. I mean, smaller defensive ends, but heavier linebackers types. Not quite all the time. They actually stand up big defensive linemen on the outside. So picture this. 4 linemen. You got 2 big ones clogging up the middle, and then you got these 2 big guys standing up rushing. They use Qualls, number 11 sometimes, who technically plays a little bit of defensive tackle, playing defensive end now. He stands up on the outside, and they stand up the other guy on the outside, and they kind of set the edge and rush a little bit too. And then, of course, they got their linebackers with Sam Wuching and whatnot. So I'm not going to talk about the players too much. I said I wasn't, but then I started. But I'm just trying to describe that scheme. So it's like a 4-2-5, and they use that to try to simultaneously stop the run and set the edge and stopping read option and a lot of those spread quarterback systems. And they try to use that to stop the run, which they have been very successful in. It is actually working quite well. And they also try to use it to rush, which can be very it can be effective when you got the right players. When you got the right type of rushers, when your guys who you're using in that scheme can rush, a guy like a Joe Mathis, who was injured. But for the most part, they've been pretty good. And Chris Peterson has a lot of respect for this guy, and I see why. Like I said, he's been successful wherever he goes, and that success is translating to this season. And like I said, they like to be multiple too, so they kind of switch around the formation a little bit and kind of bring different guys to play different parts, and sometimes they'll switch it up to where they have more heavier guys now, more smaller guys now. So you'll just have to see it to understand. And when I was looking at their video, found out it's actually very similar to USC's scheme, interestingly enough. USC with Clancy Pendergrass is not quite the same, so don't jump all over me for that. But USC does use a very changing and kind of chaotic front that kind of switches things around, puts bigger guys here, uses Porter Gustin on the outside. Basically, but that same idea of standing up your 2 outside guys and, and using the 2 tackles in the middle and just kind of change things around and create havoc, that's a similar thing that they do. It's not quite the same, but it's similar. Now, also I'm going to get talking about Jimmy Lake, who is responsible for the excellent play of their DBs. He's the defensive backs coach, and he's also the co-defensive coordinator. Jimmy Lake He's had success wherever he goes as well. He actually played on the Eastern Washington team that Kwiatkowski coached on before he went to Montana State. So they have a history there, and I'm seeing that Petersen likes the pedigree. He likes to keep guys together, guys who know each other, and bring them all into one team, and it's working out really well for him. But he's responsible for the DBs playing so well. He's coached them up. He's coached under Rod Marinelli, who's the defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys. He's coached under Raheem Morris, who's the head coach of Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and who also was a defensive back coach. So he has quite a pedigree in coaching as well. But he also is just a very smart guy and teaches the system really well. He teaches concepts. They read splits. They read the release of the wide receivers. They read formation. Sidney Jones, one of their best cornerbacks at Washington, says how he spends hours in film with Lake studying things. And so that tells a good sign of a coach when players like to spend time in the film room with him. And they've been playing well. Taylor Rapp and Sidney Jones and all those guys, they've been keeping it up. Now I'm going to move on to the offensive side of the ball just a little bit. I'm going to talk about the offensive coordinator, Jonathan Smith. He's the offensive coordinator and the quarterback's coach, so he's responsible for Jake Browning's development. He was kind of under fire a little bit in the first 2 seasons because the offense wasn't producing as much as people wanted it to be, but this year they've had an explosion. They've been balanced, and that's what he's all about. He was also the QB coach of Boise under Petersen in his last year before he got the head coaching job at UW. And Petersen liked what he saw and obviously brought him along as well. Interesting about Jonathan Smith, he's apparently pretty good as a quarterback coach. He was the quarterback coach at Idaho, the Idaho Vandals, for 6 years, even though they had 3 different head coaches in that time period, but each coach kept him along. So apparently it's something about him that these coaches like, and he must be doing a pretty good job with these offenses. Now, he's coordinating the offense now, and so he likes to, apparently he has a lot of experience with like keeping spread and keeping defenses off balance and going for quick passes and screens and trying to diversify the offensive attack and run the ball. So he's a balanced guy, but he's also very innovative in the type of things he does to get the playmakers the ball. And that way he's very similar to the type of offensive coordinators that Chris Petersen likes. And Chris Petersen probably is helping him to establish that, that multiple formation, throw in special trick play here and there type thing. And it's him working out for them. They've had a successful offensive season for the most part. So, yeah, that's the Washington coaching staff. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit about the Alabama coaching staff. Most of you know about them. Most of the Alabama fans do. I know most of you on the channel, so I'm just going to hit them a little bit. Washington fans can talk about that. But Saban, of course, Coach Saban, the best coach in college football right now. No one's done it better than him with recruiting and developing the talent and getting guys working together. Lane Kiffin, that's the offensive coordinator, has been excellent for Alabama. He was more of a West Coast guy, but Saban said he wanted to kind of change up the offense a little bit, and Lane Kiffin went out and got some other guys to kind of brainstorm with, and they start tailoring these offenses to the quarterbacks that we've had. He's done an excellent job with Blake Sims when we had him, with Jake Coker when we had him, and now with the true freshman quarterback, Jalen Hurts, and keeping the ball safe, making sure that Jalen is throwing the ball where he needs to be. He's always trying to teach the quarterbacks where to go with the ball and where the ball should be. He's always trying to call the touchdown before it's even there, and so you know that he knows when the scheme's going to work. Sometimes we Alabama fans wish he would run the ball earlier in the game, but he does get around to it eventually. So he provides good balance for the team. Jeremy Pruitt, of course, coordinates defense. The players have a lot of respect for him. Reuben Foster, in an interview, it's today or yesterday, I think it was today, but he said how much he respects him just as a man and giving them advice. So the players respect him. He's done an excellent job as a coordinator. He coordinated the Florida State defense when they won a national championship in 2013. He coached the Georgia DBs and as the defensive coordinator last year. Before he came on to Alabama again, because he was with us once before coaching DBs. We also have Derek Ansley, who's an underrated guy who doesn't get a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Media attention, because he's the defensive backs coach, and he actually coached the defensive backs at Kentucky. Has a good pedigree wherever he goes. The defensive backs get better. Alabama brought him in, and the defensive backs look really good. I thought that defensive backs might have a little trouble after Mel Tucker left last year, but Derek Ansley has come in and done a great job with these guys. So that's been really good. Tosh LaPoy coaching the outside linebackers. Tim Williams, Ryan Anderson, do I have to say more? These guys have been playing great technique all year against the run and in the pass. So Tosh LaPoy deserves what he's doing. Also a great recruiter. Burton Burns, the running back coach. What more do I have to say? We get running backs drafted into the league almost every year. The guy's great. The biggest addition to this coaching staff that I think no one talks about a lot is that Brent Key has become the co-offensive coordinator the co-offensive line coach, and it's paid dividends. Him and Mario Cristobal are coaching offensive line. Cristobal coaches the tackles. Brent Key coaches the interior line play, and I've seen improvement from the offensive line. So apparently, this addition to the staff has been really good, and that's why this offensive line, in my opinion, has been the best that we've had since the 2013 season. Because 2014 offensive line and 2015 offensive line didn't impress me, and I think the addition of Brent Key working with Mario Cristobal has been a really, really good thing for this coaching staff. And I didn't really. People see a lot of Alabama, so I won't talk a lot about their scheme, but we know what they do. Traditionally, when Saban got there, they ran a 3-4, but the defense has become a very multiple scheme defense, switching things up. Like to match up on defense, like to keep safeties over the top. That's what we like to do. We like to have more DBs than the other schools. Like then the other opposing team has receivers, so if they have 3 receivers, we like to have 3 cornerbacks and 2 safeties, or like that. Make sure that we always have the matchup what we want. Teams really have to work to force us to bring safeties down in the box. Alabama likes to play matchup, usually man to man, and let the defensive front wreak havoc. You see Alabama switch it up and maybe blitz a little bit when teams have success against just the defensive front, but with how good the front has been this year, in previous past couple years, it's been very, very unlikely, and you haven't seen it a lot. So if Washington, well, I'm not going to talk about that. I'll talk about it in the matchups. But yeah, that's the scheme that Alabama likes to use. Let the defensive front handle the offensive line and the quarterback. Let the DBs handle the receivers. It's a simple concept. And Alabama likes to play matchup, man to man, and let everybody handle their job on defense. And I can talk a little bit more about that, but we've seen enough Alabama, and enough Alabama fans on this channel know that. In our offense, we're very multiple offense. We kind of combine some similar spread concepts now to our passing game, but we also keep the power running game, but it's not so much power completely now as it's zone running, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it gets the job done sometimes, and we will revert to running the ball with the power O sometimes. And so there it is. That's the coaching staffs for Alabama and Washington. Be on the lookout for more videos coming soon about the matchups and about the analysis of the Washington team and how they will stand up against Alabama. Thank you for listening. See you next time.